What's going on, everybody? This is your host, Elijah Jackson, and we're back with another full court press. This is the NFL Predictions Week as we get prepared to kick off the NFL season this Thursday. And as we roll into the season, we see deals like Terry McLaurin and Trey Henderson already getting done. But a story that has been talked about and has definitely, at this point, kicked the offseason going into the season off with a big bang is the situation going on with the Dallas Cowboys and Micah Parsons. Now, as we roll on through the season, or through the offseason, I should say, we've seen a lot of back and forth, a lot of turmoil, and Jerry Jones is no stranger to controversy, to drawn out contract debates and disputes. But this one, from the very beginning, seemed to be a little bit different and has left the Cowboys in a different position. And honestly, it's one of the biggest stories of the offseason. I think will be one of the biggest stories of this NFL season, how things will shape out going forward. But Jerry Jones believes that the Cowboys got better by getting rid of Micah Parsons, bringing in draft picks, bringing in Kenny Clark from Green Bay, and the 2 first-round picks that they'll have in each of the next 2 drafts. But Micah Parsons being in Green Bay is now the perfect mix of what you want in a young star player. He's hungry. He's the perfect mix of pissed off and satisfied. He's now financially stable. He has a financial security and wealth for his family and his future of his bloodline. But he's also pissed off, not necessarily wanting to leave the Dallas Cowboys and facing the various forms of disrespect and enduring the contract negotiations or lack thereof with Jerry Jones in Dallas. But as Micah goes on to Green Bay, this situation is great for the Green Bay fans, a loyal fan base that's always going to pack out the stadium, no pun intended, but they have a young, talented roster across the board. And if you look at their roster and you look at their team top to bottom, I mean, there's nothing that they don't have, maybe a little bit more secondary help. But you brought in a new young rock star. And with an additions like a Micah Parsons, I mean, we saw a guy like Jordan Love talk about it earlier in this offseason, wanting to bring in a guy like Micah and what he could do for this team. And Micah's only going to elevate what they do on both sides of the ball. Even what Micah Parsons brings off the field, a good locker room guy, a good leader, just being his own man, being a stand-up young man that's striving to grow, that always puts in the work off the field and on the field. And he's been one of the best players that we've seen come into this league. I mean, on a historic level, a historic basis, as far as what he's done to elevate his game and what he's done to translate his game from his time at Penn State coming on into the Dallas Cowboys. And now the opportunity that he has moving forward with a great franchise in the Green Bay Packers. And Micah is only going to elevate this team, like I said, even with maybe their weakest point on Green Bay would be the secondary, but that only gets better with an increased pass rush that you're definitely going to have behind a player like a Micah Parsons and behind a player like a Rashawn Gary. But one of the biggest things is, and a good friend of mine brought this up, and we were kind of having a debate about it when it first happens, but history has shown to repeat itself. And it's such a crazy coincidence. It's such a crazy timeline to sit back and watch. But I mean, if you really look at the situation in itself, the Green Bay Packers have been known throughout history to have that star quarterback, whether it's a Brett Starr, or whether it's a Brett Favre, or whether it's an Aaron Rodgers, and so on and so forth, now leading on to a Jordan Love. But that 27-year-old season is a big turning point in the franchise. If you look at past history, with Brett Favre, they went out and got a Reggie White to beef up that defense and ended up leading them to a Super Bowl. With Aaron Rodgers, you went out in free agency and brought in a Charles Woodson, and that beefed up their defense, giving them that push to lead them to a Super Bowl. And now with Jordan Love being in his year 27 season, you have Micah Parsons, arguably the best defensive player in the game. If not, he's certainly on that trajectory to be one of the best defensive players in the game, having about 12 sacks a season every year that he's coming to this league. The only other guy that's done this is Reggie White, like we talked about before. And I mean, this move reshapes the division, the conference, just the team within itself. The NFL in itself is a complete roster when you really start to look at it. I know we went through predictions week already this week, but I mean, when you really look back on it, I've always had the Packers as a respected roster. I've always had the Packers as a contending franchise. I don't think they'll be a losing franchise. But what Micah Parsons brings to the table, like I said, paired alongside a guy like a Rashawn Gary, paired it with a guy like an Xavier McKinney, with a Darnell Savage and so on and so forth, they have the potential to be one of the best rosters in the NFL, and not just their individual talent, as they do have the ability to compete and to win now. But it's such an open window, like I said, with the guy that you are looking to be the face of your franchise and Jordan Love being 27 years old, drafting a guy like a Matthew Golden and having guys like Christian Watson and Romeo Dobbs and, like we said, an Xavier McKinney, Rashawn Gary. There's just so much youth across the board on this team, and it just really gives them a great window from this very moment looking on into the future to truly have the team to compete, not only in their division that's stacked up better now, but also when you look at the NFL as a whole. Like I said, I would still have probably the Eagles, the Ravens for sure as better overall rosters. But when you start to look at how Micah Parsons can impact the game and what this can bring to the Green Bay Packers, I mean, you have to start to see them in that upper echelon of rosters, at least in the top 10, if not a top 5 roster, just top to bottom, and not just in the potential in itself, but what they've shown without having a Micah Parsons on their team. And that's no disrespect to Kenny Clark. I think he's a great player, but he's in year 30, age 30 season, and he's not a Micah Parsons. He's not the star potential or impact that we see in a Micah Parsons. Although I do think he'll be a benefit as far as stopping the run in Dallas, I don't see a big change coming for Dallas. Like I see Micah Parsons can push Green Bay forward from what they've been in their past few seasons. And this year's draft, I mean, you got a steal of a pick in the 4th round with a guy like a Baron Sorrell, who will beef up that D-line and who can step in and maybe take over that spot that Kenny Clark leaves now being a D-tackle. But a great young player, a great young, asset as far as potential-wise, what he can be coming out of Texas, and then paired alongside, like we said, a Rashawn Gary and now Micah Parsons. You have a guy like a Matthew Golden that you brought in. And honestly, I think Sorrell could be perhaps the steal of the draft. I mean, you really go back and look at it, what he did at Texas, and a lot of people thought that he would be, maybe a day 2 pick or even round 3, early on in the 3rd round, and he slipped down into the 4th for whatever the reason may be. But he certainly has that potential to really make an impact on the game. And I don't see a reason, honestly, why he can't come in and why he can't, go ahead and make an immediate impact on their defense. Like I said, being surrounded by other young talent that is already in the building, and then the progression and the attention that is drawn by a player like Michael Parsons and by a player like Rashawn Gary. having that safety blanket as far as security on the back end in the secondary with an Xavier McKinney, you know, this guy could be, like I said, an immediate impact for a winning franchise, going from a winning situation, playing, top competition at a place like the University of Texas and coming into the league and now playing alongside other star players to where he won't be necessarily the focus of offensive coordinators and head coaches going into the week playing the Packers, because you just have to give so much attention to what Baron Sorrell brings to the table, but you have to give so much more attention to what Micah Parsons and Rashawn Gary can do in that pass rush, giving him the chance to be a great run stopper and getting pressure up the middle on the quarterback. But also, the biggest name of the draft in their first round pick, Matthew Golden, adds a level of speed, a deep threat, just a new level of talent and potential to an already young and stacked receiving core in Green Bay. Like we said, you have a Christian Watson, you have a Romeo Dobbs, you have a guy like Reed. Now bringing in Matthew Golden, who's shown, definitely what he could do in his time at Texas as well. But, even looking at what he's done just in this preseason, the guy looks to be off the charts, and he showed his speed in the combine, but he's also showing that he's more than just a point A to point B speed guy. He can get in and out of breaks. He can, really has good hands. And I think him paired with Jordan Love, and it's really their goal is to really tap fully into Jordan Love's potential and get all of what he can be out of him this year. But guys, like I said, like Romeo Dobbs, and you see his ability. And as far as what Dobbs and, like I said, what Dobbs and Christian Watson and different guys, along those lines, just of how they come into Green Bay and over time, how the Packers have shown the ability to draft and develop well. I think it'll be the same story for a guy like a Matthew Golden coming into, like I said, a young receiving core that really has the potential to take that next step, that next level. Hopefully you can keep a guy like a Christian Watson healthy. Hopefully you can get the full potential of a Matthew Golden out early on. See a lot of young guys like a Brian Thomas Jr. or Malik Neighbors and so on and so forth coming into the receiving position and be able to make the impact early, just translating well from the collegiate game. And I think Matthew Golden definitely has a chance to do that alongside this young stacked receiving core. And that translates to, everything across the board. You have a staple running back already as far as having a guy like Josh Jacobs, who we haven't spoken much about, but his game and his name goes without saying. Josh Jacobs is a guy who's going to help you control the clock as far as being in a situation where now with a pass rush and, adding on to what you can do in the secondary and just, like I said, just having a good defense is generally, especially in the front seven and back into the safeties, and maybe need to touch up what's going on at the corner position a little bit. But you really have a complementary football team that Josh Jacobs can help you control the clock and take some of that weight off of Jordan Love. But Jerry sent Micah to the team that beat them last in the playoffs just 2 years ago. And it was baffling to me, and I think it shocked a lot of people across the NFL landscape. I saw it as a potential move that, a lot of people brought up the Herschel Walker trade. And if Micah was to be traded, I definitely thought it would be something closer to along those lines, given his age and his production, but his potential as well. But this just goes to show that Jerry let his ego win. You didn't get as much as you could for Micah Parsons. You traded him to somebody that you're going to have to deal with in your own conference. And I'm just not sure if Dallas will ever be ready to win on that level again without Micah Parsons. I mean, with Micah goes a big part of Dallas's identity and what they've been these past few years. And without him, I just don't know what you're getting out of this Cowboys defense. And there'll be a lot of turnover in these next few years and what you can get out of those picks. But Micah Parsons is paid and primed to have the best years of his career. And he's been on the cusp before since he's come into this league. I mean, the guy has had outstanding seasons, but he could really go into being a defensive player of the year, and maybe a perennial candidate, looking back like an Aaron Donald or a J.J. Watt, somebody that's really dominating the position, really dominating the voters. And, what he brings to the table is just such a much more multiplied and focused effect on the game being outside of the atmosphere of Dallas. While Dallas is great as far as in the business sense, like we said under Jerry Jones in the past 25 to 30 years or so, there's been the era of, like a lot of people have been saying, the soap opera atmosphere, the need for clicks and for likes and for everything that makes money and generates attention, but doesn't necessarily generate wins when it comes to playing football. And now that Micah Parsons is free from contract negotiations, free from a meddling owner, free from a position, as far as I think when Dan Quinn was there, and no disrespect to Mike Zimmer or, any other DCs that they've had or, coaches that they've had in Dallas. But we all know that Jerry Jones has often angled the coaching position and has placed his hand firmly on the coaching position and staff as far as who's coming into the building, how things are done, being the owner and the GM. And I think being under a guy like a Matt LaFleur now, Micah has the chance to really thrive and be completely zoned in a town like Green Bay that is truly built up of diehard fans. I mean, there's nothing that I think can hold them back as far as holding Micah back with the expectations and the different things that you just have to deal with in Dallas being a Cowboy. And now you're surrounded by a young pass rusher on the other side and Rashawn Gary. And they honestly could be the best pass rush duo in this league moving forward. And then, like I said, you having a guy like an Xavier McKinney on the back end who showed what he can do in holding down his defense in spite of maybe not having the best secondary, supporting him, having guys like a Jair Alexander out with injury the past couple of years and now moving on to Baltimore. I think that's a position that they could upgrade. But I mean, one of the best things that you can do if you feel that your secondary or your corners may be a bit shaky or just not the strongest, unit on your team is to improve your pass rush. And it's definitely going to be improved, like I said, with the tandem of Micah Parsons and Rashawn Gary rushing the quarterback every week. But the best thing about it, I mean, like we said earlier, is the complementary football. You have a guy like a Josh Jacobs supporting a guy like Jordan Love, because Jordan Love has amazing arm talent to be able to throw the ball all over the field. And we've seen him do great things, like I said, with Christian Watson healthy and with Romeo Dobbs and Jalen Reed. And like I said, now having Matthew Golden, but kind of like the Eagles did last year, while you have the quarterback that can get things done at the same time, having a strong run game and having a great quarterback like a Josh Jacobs gives you the opportunity to take a load off of Jordan Love and to make your offense not as predictable and one-dimensional. And there's still a few things that I think could happen with this roster. Could you add a guy like an Asante Samuel Jr. when he comes back healthy and ready to play and beef up this secondary and have a young star corner to go along with this secondary and go along with this front seven. Could you bring in a guy like a Stephon Gilmore who has a little more veteran experience but showed that he's still very effective being in Minnesota last year? Could you bring in a vet receiver like an OBJ who still has, I think, definitely potential in the tank as far as what he can bring to an offense, but a great situation where he wouldn't have to play every down and can give a lot of, experience to these guys like a Christian Watson and, like we said, Romeo Dobbs and Jalen Reed and so on and so forth. Just giving them that veteran experience, teaching him from, his own experiences as his time as a star and as a role player and as a Super Bowl winning player. I think he would bring a lot to the table for a young team like this. And undoubtedly, Lambeau will be back leaping this season. I mean, you have everything that you need at this point to go out and truly compete at the highest of levels with any team that you'll come across in this season. And like I said, while looking back at my predictions from our first episode of Predictions Week, I'm going to have to reevaluate some things. And like I said, you guys will see those coming up in the shorts here this week, leading up to Thursday's game to kick off the season between the Eagles and the Cowboys. But Green Bay is definitely in an entire different position now. I mean, this is a young team that has so much going for themselves from, like we said, the young quarterback, the young receiving core, a great proven young running back. You have guys, like I said, like Xavier McKinney back there in the secondary. Everyone knows where Rashawn Gary is and the mutual benefit that having Michael Parsons will be, because Rashawn Gary is a beast on his own. But can you imagine what it's going to be like with him next to Michael Parsons and vice versa? I mean, you can't single either one of these guys out as far as wanting to attack them and as far as going at them. And then the versatility of both of those guys. I mean, you could put either one of those guys you could have them rushing off the line at the DN position, or you could have them at the linebacker position, dropping back into coverage, or even still rushing from the outside backer positions. And even a guy like Michael Parsons, like we said, with maybe a little bit of less assurance in the secondary as of right now, you can put a guy like Michael Parsons even in at the middle linebacker. He's so fast. He's so versatile. He's got so much of an understanding of the game and can play sideline to sideline that he can cover up so many holes for a team, often like he did for Dallas. And like I said, while you are losing Kenny Clark, I don't think by any stretch of the imagination that you'll have the problem in Green Bay like you had in Dallas of struggling to stop the run with having guys that are beefed up on this front seven. And even a guy like Rashawn Gary, I mean, that's not a small man himself. I mean, you really look at the entire situation, you look at everything that's going on, and I mean, it's undoubtable that this team is complete, like we said, from top to bottom. And having a young, talented coach like a Matt LaFleur, I know he's been in the league, some time now since it's taken over from Mike McCarthy, and taking over for, the head coaching position with Aaron Rodgers before moving on to Jordan Love. But that's a guy that's shown and proved what he can do. And now it's time for them to get everything that they can get out of Jordan Love. It's time for them to see him rise to really being the face of the franchise. And I think Jordan Love is already, pushing the outer rims of being an elite quarterback. Like I said, he has all the arm talent in the world. He's definitely not a statue. He's an athletic guy that can move around and extend plays. Like, he's not really a runner. He can draw plays out and a lot of times make something out of nothing and can be a pinpoint accurate guy. And he's definitely at least in the top half from 15, 16 up. But really with the past years of consistency as far as making the playoffs, I think they really can see the next step come out of Jordan Love, like I said, with the elements of complementary football, adding another receiver to this core who can unlock a different element of the receivers with a guy like Matthew Golden and his speed and his potential just overall as a receiver. But this immediate impact of what you will see bringing in a guy like Micah Parsons, I mean, it's going to completely change the look of this team, man. What they faced in the past few years, like I said, you beat the Cowboys 2 years ago, but then you were out in the next round. And then last year you faced the Eagles and you were out in the wild card round. And I think they have the potential and the chance to now really take that step forward as far as being a perennial playoff contender, more so than just, yes, we expect Green Bay to make the playoffs. And I mean, like I said, they won a playoff game 2 years ago against Dallas, and then they were put out by San Francisco. And while, yes, last year may be a step back as far as from where you made it in the playoffs, losing your first playoff game in the wild card round versus the Eagles. At the same time, they still had an 11-win season last year. So you see the progression already, just as being a consistent winning team, having that identity, like we said, and knowing what you're getting from each phase, each group, and knowing what you're getting from this football team all around. But I think, like I said, they really have that chance and that potential to move on from the last 2 years of football that we've seen from these guys. The just overall impact of what Micah Parsons does for a team, like we said, in Dallas. There's talent there in Dallas for sure. A guy like Overshown, on the back end you have Bland and Diggs when he's healthy. There's I even like a guy like a Malik Hooker who's a little bit on up there as far as being a vet at this point in his career. But it's not to say that Micah Parsons was the only reason that the Dallas Cowboys were successful in any sense defensively. But I mean, when you really take a look at it, Micah Parsons undoubtedly was the biggest reason for success when it came to the defense of the Dallas Cowboys. And why everybody talks about, the Cowboys struggling in this past season without them having Dak Prescott with his injury. I mean, the Cowboys were losing before then. Like we said, one reason being the struggle to stop the run and not being the biggest team defensively, having, smaller guys who maybe safeties or corners on other teams coming down, playing heavy minutes in the linebacker position. And, just all around, I believe this is an improved situation for Micah Parsons, like I said, to grow and to really display everything that he has in the toolbox from just an all-around position and taking that next step of being a defensive player of the year. Micah Parsons will change the look, the face, the expectations of this team, but I also think he will benefit from being with a young, talented team that he has the opportunity to grow with. Like I said, they have that chance to win right now, but they also have you never know with the NFL, but I think they have a good long window of opportunity to be a team that grows together, and you never know what we could see. But like we said before, history repeats itself. This is the age 27 season for Jordan Love. This is maybe that repeating of adding a Reggie White, adding a Charles Woodson, and now you add Micah Parsons, arguably the best defensive player in the league, to an already proven Green Bay team that's shown they can win. And we'll see what you get. Like I said, this shakes up predictions week. This shakes up the entire NFL. And in the next season coming up here, in the next few years or so, I'm expecting a lot from the Green Bay Packers. This is the Full Court Press Podcast. I want to thank you guys for joining me. This will be the last episode this week of Predictions Week, but we will have a few shorts coming up this week leading up to Thursday night kickoff. So I hope you guys enjoyed the episode. I enjoyed being here with you, and I'll see you all next week.